Our lecture is about the deontology of journalism. Deontology is a branch of the philosophical ethics that analyzes the concept of duty. And the Greek word deon means duty. Deontology of some profession is the applied discipline that reveals the essence of duty in this profession. In all areas related to special responsibility and to the direct impact on the person and on the society, for example, in medicine, in education, there are special deontological norms and codes. Among such areas is media sphere, which has a great impact on society, on the values and mentality of the audience. But unfortunately, this impact, this influence is often destructive. Awareness of this fact made journalists at the beginning of the last century comprehend the problems of journalistic duty and responsibility, develop forms of self-control, and create special organization for this. These issues are important not only for journalists or for specialists. They are important for audience too. If a person knows the problems in modern media sphere, then he or she will more successfully use it. It is not by chance that a whole direction of media literacy has appeared, which is associated, first of all, with the correct using of media products. Now let us briefly consider the main problems of journalistic deontology. First of all, let us dwell on the role of journalism in modern society. Journalism has always regarded as a socially significant profession, but now authors who deal with the problems of journalism, deontology, distinguish two opposing positions. Proponents of the first position defined the classical point of view. They emphasize that the social role and responsibility of journalism today has increased. So a modern journalist must well understand the possible consequences of his work. Opponents rely on so-called market ideology, which has criticized, for example, by the famous psychologist and social philosopher Erich Fromm. According to the market ideology, everything in nature and in society can be considered as a commodity. Accordingly, information is a commodity too, and journalism is a commercial profession. Media researches are concentrated on narrow circles of problems. For example, on the organizational and technical side of the journalist production, on opportunities associated with the new technologies, on methods of attracting the audience. The idea is spreading that journalism is the production of the information, which should be attractively packaged and sold with maximum benefit. This situation raises a number of important issues. Let us dwell on the main thing. Can information be considered as a commodity? Many journalist ethic codes emphasize that information is not a commodity but a public good. Public good has following characteristics. First, it is used collectively by all citizens, regardless of whether they pay for it or not. Second, it is practically impossible to exclude a person from the circle of users of public good. Third, the using of public goods by one person does not reduce the possibility of using by others. Fourth, restricting access to the public good is extremely difficult. But if this restriction is implemented, it endangers the stability of society. We can see that most of information fall under this criteria. Therefore, only part of information may relate to commodity. And mass media does not sell information for us. They sell access for information. In the same way, we pay not for the water in our homes, but for the delivery of water. Why it is important? The main goal of market economy is profit. Therefore, consumer interests fade into the background. So, firms try to reduce prime costs of products by reducing the quality. As a result, in the mass media sphere, people often receive incomplete, low-quality information. It is one of the most important problems of modern journalism. Now let us move on to the more practical issues. The next question we will consider is the basic categories of deontology. The main deontological category is duty itself. It is defined as morally reasoned self-coercion to action. The concept of moral argumentation is important here because an act can be performed not for moral reasons, but by someone or because of the benefit and so on. Thus, the pursuit of duty implies a conscious choice between different options. More precisely, it is the choice between our desires and some important goals. These goals can be important both for society and for ourselves. So, in the concept of duty, we can distinguish the personal and social aspects. But it must be emphasized that duty does not require suppressing our personality, but overcoming our weaknesses and imperfections. Another important category is responsibility. Responsibility has two main meanings. On the other hand, it characterizes the volume of real demands that can be presented to the person, taking into account his or her capabilities and the specific situation. Thus, although duty is unconditional, but responsibility is conditional. For example, in war, everyone has the common duty to defend the country, but the responsibility is different for the officer and for the soldier. On the other hand, responsibility characterizes a personal internal readiness to fulfill his or her duty and be responsible for the consequences. The next question is professional principles and norms. Principles here are the most common moral standards of the behavior. Norms are the concretization of principles for certain situations. There is no clear boundary here. Main principles of journalistic deontology can be grouped as follows. The first is the principle of freedom and independence of the media. Independence here means the absence of external influence and corruption. This principle, in various forms, can be found in all ethical codes of journalism. Freedom for a journalist means not only a self-expression, but the possibility of a free search for truth, free formation of one's position, and free presenting it to the audience. Two levels of freedom are distinguished here: freedom for and freedom from. Freedom from is overcoming all that impedes the exercise of journalistic duty. Freedom for is the use of freedom from for creative and social activity aimed at the benefit of society. So this freedom is connected with duty and responsibility. The second is the principle of objectivity and completeness of the information. Many people believe that a journalist cannot be objective because of his or her personal motives, views, and assessments. But we can formulate the rules in compliance with which we may consider the journalist product as objective. Journalist does not allow distortion of facts. In the problematic material, journalist provides arguments of all parties. Journalist provides the most complete information on the topic. Journalist has his or her own position, but separates it from facts. The principle of completeness of information is especially important here, since lack of some facts or ignorance of them will create a false picture of reality for the audience. Third is the principle of protecting of persons' rights. It combines norms that relate to various issues, primarily the following: restricting media interference in privacy. That is not only ethical, but also a legal norm. The laws of many countries prohibit the collection, storage, and dissemination of information about a person's life without person's consent. Protection against defamation and libel. It is also not only an ethical but a legal norm. Observance of persons' wishes when persons act as a source of information. But here are some problems there. First of all, of determining the boundaries of private life. The fourth is the principle of humanism. In the document named International Principles of Professional Ethics in Journalism, this principle is formulated as follows: the ethical commitment to the universal values of humanism calls for the journalist to abstain from any justification for or incitement to wars or aggression and the arms race, especially in nuclear weapons, and all other forms of violence, hatred of discrimination, especially racialism and apartheid, oppression by tyrannical regimes, colonialism and neo-colonialism, as well as other great evils which afflict humanity, such as poverty, malnutrition, and diseases. By so doing, the journalist can help eliminate ignorance and misunderstanding among peoples, make nationals of a country sensitive to the needs and desires of others, ensure the respect for the rights and dignity of all nations, all peoples, and all individuals without distinction of race, sex, language, nationality, religion, or philosophical convention. And the last thing we dwell on is the topic of self-regulation of the journalistic community. Self-regulation in journalism is an internal corporate regulation in contrast to external regulation, legal, economical, administrative. The main forms of self-regulation are professional codes of ethics and independent media councils. The first forms of self-regulation arose at the turn of the 19th and 20th centuries. They were due to the fact that during this period the press first gained a mass audience and powerful newspaper monopolies began to form, and their role has increased. As a result, a mass press had formed, with its sensationalism, interference to people's private life, and entertaining character. The decline in the quality of journalistic materials worried many leading journalists. As a result, codes of professional ethics for the journalist began to appear. It is believed that the first of them were in Europe, the Charter of Duty, adopted in 1918 in France by National Syndicate of Journalists, and in the United States, the Code adopted in 1910 by the Kansas Editors Association. In 1936, the League of Nations adopted the International Convention on the Use of Broadcasting for Peace. The Second World War slowed down the codification process, but after it, codes began to appear in many countries. A new stage of interest in journalistic ethics began in 1970s. It was associated with the activities of UNESCO and culminated in the adoption of the international principles of journalistic ethics, which I have already mentioned. Media councils are journalistic public organizations that carry out ethical regulation of media sphere on the basis of codes. At first, they functioned as the press councils, but with the advent of electronic media, similar structures appeared for regulation of this era. The first councils were created at the beginning of the 20th century. All types of councils have the following features in common. First, they work as quasi-judicial bodies that protect the rights of the public. The council considers complaints of the audience, appoints a meeting to which representatives of audience and of the mass medium are invited, and makes appropriate decision. This decision is published both on the council's website and in affiliated mass media. Second, councils could protect mass mediums too from unlawful actions by state bodies or some individuals. Third, the media councils firstly include representatives of the mass mediums themselves. Secondly, they can include representatives of publishing houses. And thirdly, representatives of the audience. Thus, self-regulation provides journalists with the opportunity to demonstrate the responsibility of the media without any additional interference from the authorities. We examined only the most important issues regarding journalistic deontology. In fact, in this area, there are many problems that are actively discussed by specialists and journalists. For example, this is the already mentioned problem of defining the boundaries of privacy, or the problem of restriction on freedom of speech. Everyone remembers the tragedy of Charlie Hebdo magazine. As a result, a debate broke out regarding defining the boundary between acceptable criticism and insulting the feelings of believers. But such issues require a long and detailed consideration, which is not possible in our lecture. Therefore, this is where we end, and I thank you for attention.